Pat Battle here with Living Web Farms. We're back to our Resilience Daily series, which we are doing in collaboration with the Organic Growers School to offer you immediate information on how to act now to find, nurture, propagate, and overall ensure that you have the plants to provide you food and herbal medicine for current and ongoing sustenance. And today we're going to look at pretty overgrown, ready to be potted up again or divided winter savory. So this offers two different opportunities for propagation. One is a subject we've covered in other videos, and that is root cuttings. And they're, slower, but you could get far more. Imagine if you did root cuttings from 30% of this plant, you would have a lot of root cuttings. We're just going to do one or two right now in one pot just to show you again how to do that and show you with a little finer thing. We've done bigger root cuttings now. So we're going to take this, and by the way, proper care of this plant means I would have cut it back sometime in late summer last year, so it'd be a lot lower and bushier, and I just didn't get to it. This is kind of an orphan that I am now realizing is a resource because we want to grow a lot more herbs. All of the Mediterranean herbs have medicinal qualities. They're antibacterial, some of them are antifungal, some of them are antiviral. And they're also, of course, loaded with antioxidants. They're also wonderful farmscaping plants. When they're in bloom, the insects love them. So it's a good idea to grow loads of them. And of course, they make for really good cooking too. So there's our cutting. Actually so diminutive compared to what we have filmed so far. I get closer to the camera so you can see this as well as possible. I'm pulling off some leaves low down. I'm pulling them off into the new growth. And there's only a little bit of new growth at this point. And then I'm going to fill my pot up full with soil. Doesn't have to be a very big pot because these are going to take a while to get some size on them. I'm going to pack it in and firm it well so I can firm this well. And I'm going to slide it down in. And it's a little harder to do this because it's not that strong a thing. I better make a hole actually with my finger. Make a hole down in there. Nice and deep, because I want to be sure that I get this buried up to and ever so slightly including a little bit of new growth. Not too much because it'll probably rot out. And then as always, I want to firm this really well. And if you've seen our other videos, I talk a lot about removing a bunch of foliage so that the plant doesn't have to work too hard. The savory really probably doesn't need as much removed because it's a pretty glossy leaf, and it's such a small cutting that I'm not going to take quite as much off it, just some of the bigger leaves on the bottom. And that, of course, is done better before you stick it in the pot. And so that's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to show you one or two more. This one's a little bigger, which will make it a little easier. And if you look up close there, you can see where it's kind of woody here, and then it goes to a softer, lighter color, and that's the new growth. And all these leaves are coming off the bottom. They're all places where roots can come out. And then for this one, I'm going to remember to take off the leaves. I'm taking off the new growth before I stick it in the soil, which will be a little bit easier on me and the plant. Oops, I took off the growing tip on that one. Gentle, be careful. There's a chance it'll make a new growing tip. I'm going to stick it in, but I probably just toasted this one. Sorry about that cutting. That happens. Fortunately, we have no shortage. I'm going to go for this one here, which is nice and big. I'm going to be much more careful about removing the two upper leaves. Get that done first so I don't put a bunch of energy into making something that's not going to work. Still have a growing tip. Okay, now I'm in business. And this is a very fragile new growth here. So you got to be careful with that. And you do want to remove all the leaves where you're going to bury it, because if they rot, it's not good for the plant. Got one more leaf to remove there. Pretty fussy work for my less than perfectly dexterous hands. Dexterous, is that a word? Anyway, I'm then going to slide it down in as deep as I can get it. and firm it in. And we'll leave that for now. I'll probably do one or two more before we're done. And now we'll talk about this guy. So there's different ways to do this. This plant looks like it has lots of growing places where there are roots, and we'll find out if that's true by trying to first just break a piece off. But then I'm going to talk about cutting it. Sometimes it's easier to cut it. But right here, this looks like that one stem there is unto itself and well rooted unto itself. So I think I can break it off. Easier said than done. And you have to be careful because sometimes there's only a little bit of branch that's actually got root on it, and you need to actually cut the final place. But there, I don't think I needed to. This actually is a pretty well rate of cutting, and I expect it to grow pretty fast. Right there was the place where it could have gone south. Had I not gotten it to tear off there, I could have yanked out the whole rest of the plant with very little root. But I managed to tear it off. And you can cut instead. You just can't get quite as many by cutting. Usually, you know, where you could get maybe 6 rooted pieces from this. If you can tear them all off, if you cut, you might get 2 more. And we're just going to show the cutting part next, because if I get 3 out of this, I'll be happy. And the whole point of this is, as we look into the future, we don't know what our resources are going to be, and having a lot of these kinds of plants will give us more flexibility in how we cook, how we make medicine, and how we ensure that our gardens have the right balance of insects so that we don't have to worry about insect outbreaks this summer. So that there I think is going to be a booming plant. I'm actually very optimistic about that guy, and I love winter savory, by the way. Savory is most famously used with beans. It's like the herb to use for cooking beans. Okay, so now we're going to look at how many stems there are. And really, if I'm going to cut, I only see one place where that's going to work well. And it's going to be right between the biggest part of the plant and this one little offshoot here. But it's a lot easier when you're first starting out trying to do the tearing I just did. You might be frustrated, where you're likely to be way more successful by cutting. And then you want to be really careful, because sometimes you've got it right and just some intertwined branches don't want to come apart, and you end up pulling your whole plant apart. Here what's happened is this one branch here has rooted and grown up this whole other part here. So if I were to try to pull the main one away from this one, I would actually yank this one apart. And so I'm going to cut this where this actually propagated the other one. Now it's apart, and lo and behold, a couple things have happened. I'm going to try and root this guy as a bigger cutting. And I've also noticed that I could try to separate this one more time here. And I probably will for demonstration purposes, but the truth is, if I were not doing this for demonstration, I wouldn't push it. But the idea here is, what can we accomplish? How much can we get going? Meanwhile, this is the mother plant, and this isn't going to miss a beat. This is going to fill out the biggest pot I have, which is this pot here, really quickly and be ready to go in the ground within a matter of weeks. Okay? This one here, within a month, it'll be a booming plant to go in the ground. You want a well-draining mix for all herbs. They don't like wet feet. All Mediterranean herbs anyway. And as I've said, these are wonderful beneficial insect plants too. So they can give you medicine and food, seasoning for your food, and arborage and sustenance for the beneficial insects. Okay, so there we have 2 really nice winter savories from one plant. And now we're going to get frisky and see if we can make this into 2 more plants. And it's going to be, I'm going to try cutting it. And so the first thing to do is to really determine which parts are attached to which parts. This guy here really wanted to tease me into trying to pull it apart here, and that'd be a disaster because it's actually attached to this side here. Okay. And as I look at this, I think it's a tear. I think it's going to do better to try and tear this off. Nope, it's not. It's going to have to be cut because the root's real strong right there. Or the woody branch that rooted. Okay. I think we're going to get it. Now I think I'm going to tear once I cut through that. I'm optimistic about both of these. These are both really nice divisions. Okay? And you could go crazy and possibly even separate this one off too, but we're going to stop where we're ahead. Okay? You want to be careful. This one actually, I don't even want to take it out to show you again, but although there's a lot of root attached, it's only attached at one point. And if I was careless, I could have just hinged the top right off of most of the root. So really pay attention to how it's attached and gently get it in there. It's going to quickly take advantage of the root mass it has and move energy to the whole plant. So the fact that only a few places are attached to the top probably won't matter. But this one would probably want less light. These two guys here, they go back in full sun right away. This one would probably want to go in the shade until you were sure that it was getting lots of water to its top. You know? And once again, if you did one that had very little root, you would just take lots of leaves off. Keep it in the shade till it re-rooted and got growing. We haven't got that problem, so we're not going to bother to show you that right now. But you can imagine it, you just like take off probably 60% of the leaves. If this guy had only a little bit of root on it, just a little bit of root with a few fine, small rootlets, that's what you would do and it would still make it. Okay? All right. And there's our last one for this. Except for we will also look at turning that bigger piece into a big rooted cutting, which will be slow to develop, but because it'll be a big plant, it'll be worth the time. And I'm always firming these really well, right? Because the roots are in shock, they can't get water easily, and capillary action is their friend. That's how they're going to get their water. Okay, so what do we do with this guy here? I think what we're going to do is take off these leaves here and remove just a few little leaflets from the top here and bury the whole thing and see what it does. And we really are. Sometime soon we're going to do a check-in on all the plants we've been propagating and see how they're coming along. And talk about what we did, how we did them, and what the outcome is. I'm thinking that we're being fairly successful from my glancing under the table and on top of the table of the different ones that we've done. So this guy is going to be buried deep, the whole thing, so only a little bit shows at the top. And a few places at the top are going to be allowed to root. Mostly it's going to be living off of its root mass and photosynthesizing from its leaves. Only a few leaves were removed from the bottom. So this is definitely going to be given a lot of time before it gets to get out in the sun again. But how you tell, by the way, is if you see growth. If you see growth, you've got it. You're there. It's working. Okay? And I'm actually quite optimistic that that'll work too. That's more like probably the end of May before I put it out. You know, before it's liable to have, maybe even early June before it's got a nice root ball. But it'll be a nice plant, you know. So if we're completely successful, we have 5 plants from one plant. And if we're wildly successful, we have 2, and I could do as many more as I want, or 3 more little tiny seedlings, which you won't really be using as an herb when they're this small until sometime in August. But then these are a perennial, and you'll have a nice clump, and you'll be able to pick from them in the winter on the warmer days, and you'll be able to pick from them next spring and then propagate all over again and continue to share plants so more and more people can have herb gardens.